stop me now, they won't stop me now, they won't stop me, no. They won't stop me now, they won't stop me now, they won't stop me, no.
Welcome back to We Are Mighty. How you been? How's life treating you? Has it been a long couple of weeks for you? Seems like it's been forever. I swear, between every episode, the time seems to get longer and longer, although the days go faster and faster. That makes no sense. I'm happy to see y'all. I'm happy you joined me this week. I got a lot to talk about. It may not be a lot to talk about. I'm just wishy-washy this week. So bear with me. The last time the show dropped, my brother had a championship fight for Bellator. And congratulations to my brother Corey Anderson, who is now the new light heavyweight champion of Bellator. Give it up for Corey. Anyway, what he did the night of the fight, and he gave me fair warning, which if he hadn't, I probably would have been a mess. But his after fight suit, after they have the fight, they always dress up for interviews and everything. He had a tailor custom remake my son's prom suit, and it looked amazing. Miles was a little snazzy dresser, so it was very nice. It was emotional for my whole family because nobody knew except for me and his wife. And once my mom realized, it hit her and other members of the family. It triggered even my oldest son. It was a trigger for him and even Miles' father. It was a happy moment, but it was so emotional. Even when he won, I was screaming and clapping for him, but all I could do was yell out, "Miles, he did it. Your uncle did it." Miles was his biggest fan. Even back when he wrestled in college, everywhere he went, Miles was right there with them. They always knew Lil Mighty was right there with his Uncle Corey. So for him to go all the way to win this championship was a huge deal. And even when Corey made his Instagram post, one of his pictures, he wrote under it, "We did it, Bogey." Bogey is a nickname that my brothers gave Miles. I honestly don't know what it came from, because if I'm not mistaken, a bogey has something to do with golf. And we didn't do nothing with golf. But nevertheless, the nickname stuck, and Bogey he was. And he knew if they said Bogey, they were talking to him. So that Friday was very, very emotional. It was, like I said, a great day. But there's even pictures of my brother in the ring where he's down on his knees and he's kind of holding his head in his hands because he knew how much Miles wanted him to get this. And for Miles not to be here, it was devastating for a lot of us. And that just had me thinking about triggers. It's kind of weird how some things can trigger emotions related to grief. Like I said, my brother winning that championship was amazing, was a cause for celebration. But for us, it was a celebration, but it was tainted because his biggest fan wasn't there to share it with him. And I know I spent at least 15 minutes crying, just saying, "Baby, he did it. Your uncle did it." I confess, I even took out my phone and texted Miles' number, knowing he wasn't going to get it. I texted his number to tell him, "Your uncle did it." Texted him a picture of his belt or his uncle with his belt. Luckily, no one has his number right now because, it probably would have been like, who's this random person sending me a picture of this guy with this belt? But it just, I don't know. It was weird not to, because we usually would have been watching the fight together or somewhere close by. This one was in Ireland. Usually if it's in the States, the whole family's there. And Miles has been to every one of his fights in the States. So it was a huge win, but obviously something was missing. There was an emptiness. It's hard to describe how you're celebrating and grieving at the same time. But that's another thing about grief. It's just so sneaky. And speaking of triggers, there's just, you would expect something like, okay, my son was shot, so hearing about a shooting or something of that nature, that's going to be a trigger. But that's not the only thing. In our town of Rockford, Illinois, which probably more people have heard about in the last couple of weeks than they have any other time, we had a situation where a young man was at work at Walmart, and a man came in and basically killed this young man, 18 years old. And, the story is that the 28-year-old man was walking around Walmart. He had grabbed 2 knives from the store and walked around looking at, I hate to say it, but looking at black people. He said he was giving them dirty looks. And this young 18-year-old black man was working at Walmart, and he stabbed him. Not provoked. Just, I guess that was the victim he chose. And that was difficult for me. I didn't know this young man. However, my youngest son, who's also 18, he went to school with him. So it was very upsetting for him. Several people that I know this young man. Even my engineer went to church with him. And those things, those were triggers for me. Seeing people having to deal with a devastating death like this, and seeing how it hurt, thinking of this mother of this young man having to deal with her son being killed. I can say that I can relate. Of course, I can't say that I know how she feels, because it's a completely different situation. And that's the thing that I try to get people to understand. Well, you can talk to her, you can tell her. I can't, because I don't know what she feels. We've talked about this before. I know that she's devastated. I know that she's hurting. But to know exactly what she's going through and how it is day by day for her, it's not going to be the same as it is for me. But it still devastates me. They had a candlelight vigil for this young man, and I couldn't go. It was just too much. It was too difficult, because I hate to say it, they got the guy who killed him. It was senseless. It was horrible, and he deserves whatever's coming to him. But they didn't catch the guy that killed my son. He's still out here. He might be looking at me. He might be watching this podcast. I don't know. But he's still out there. And so dealing with or trying to help someone else with grief, especially a mother who's lost her young son, is so difficult. Not that I'm not empathetic, not that I'm not sympathetic, not that I don't care about the facts, the fact that it happened. I definitely care. My heart goes out to his family. But to be in the midst of a large group of people who are dealing with that grief, and it being a fresh grief, scares me half to death. I spoke before about how I sang at a funeral of a lady that I know, and her daughter was about the same age as my son when she died. And it was so difficult for me to be there, but I wanted to support her. but I can't subject myself to some of that. Every time I think I've gotten so far from it, I realize I am absolutely not. And then just a few days after that young man was stabbed, some other guy went on basically a killing spree, I guess you would call it, going house to house in the neighborhood, attacking people. 4 people died. 5 people were severely injured. Who does this? Like, these things just are so difficult to deal with. I try to watch the news. It's getting harder and harder because the things that are happening in this world are just crazy. But those kind of things are understandable as triggers. People being killed because my son was killed. People having to deal with that devastation because my son passing away was devastating for me. But then there's other things that you would never think would be a trigger. I am known for my spaghetti. People love my spaghetti. Every family gathering, I'm assigned to make the spaghetti. Well, Miles, on his birthday, that's what he would want. Miles, what do you want for your birthday? Pot of spaghetti. And can't nobody else have none. I had to make him a big pot. And if anybody else wanted spaghetti, theirs had to be made separately from his because he loved my spaghetti. Miles, what do you want for Christmas? Pot of spaghetti. Well, 2 days before he was killed, he was just at my house eating spaghetti. And just about a week ago, I was able to make spaghetti for the first time since July. I literally cried the whole time I made it. And then when it came time to taste it, I couldn't. I stood there with the fork with the spaghetti on it, and I just looked at it, and I could not bring myself to taste it. First, I thought it was going to taste bad because I hadn't made it in so long, and I was so emotional in making it. And I stood there shaking with a fork full of spaghetti and couldn't bring myself to taste it. And I probably stood there, literally, not exaggerating, for 15 to 20 minutes, just holding this fork. And my husband happened to be out in the garage, so he didn't know what was going on in the house. And I finally brought it to my mouth and I tasted it. And it was perfect, just like I always make. And that was a problem. Believe it or not, I could not swallow the mouthful of spaghetti. I stood there holding it in my mouth with tears just streaming down my face. It was the craziest thing. Like, it's spaghetti. I get it was his favorite meal, but it was so difficult to the point that my husband came in the house and saw me standing there in tears with a mouthful of spaghetti, and all he could do was wrap his arms around me because he didn't know what else to do. He knew the reason behind it because I had tried a few times. Oh, I'm going to make spaghetti today. And then it was, I just can't do it. Oh, I'm going to try to make spaghetti. Today is not that day. So I finally made it 8 months later. And it took everything in me to swallow that perfect bite of spaghetti, because all I could think about was how much my son loved it. And then I thought later to let my oldest son know that I actually was able to make a pot of spaghetti because I know how much you guys loved it. And he texted me back and said, "Mom, that just made me cry. I just thought about me and my brother arguing over spaghetti," which they did. A funny memory, yes, but you wouldn't think something like that would trigger such emotions, not just in me, in members of my family. I can't go bowling. That was what we did the night before he passed away. We were done bowling at midnight. 4 a.m. he was gone. I can barely set foot in a bowling alley. My husband and I were driving one night. It was kind of late and it was raining and it was dark. And I just realized the place where we were driving. And I let the window down and I saw the distribution center where my son used to work. And I lost it. The distribution center didn't have anything to do with it. But I knew there were people in that building that absolutely loved my son. I know it from the people who came to the funeral, from the people who reached out to me, from the amazing plaque that they sent me with a picture of him saying how wonderful it was working with him and how his presence would be missed. And I literally was just looking at a building in the distance in the dark. And I could not hold back the tears. It's crazy how the smallest thing can bring on so many emotions. I remember we visited my mom's house and my youngest son gave her a hug. She smelled his cologne and she burst into tears because everybody knew Miles always wanted to look good and smell good. And his cologne reminded her of Miles. There's so many things that can be a trigger that you just would never think about. I think I told the story of how when I saw an empty ambulance and it just threw me into all kinds of emotions. I even yelled out, I should have been there. That ambulance wasn't going to the scene of the crime where my son was killed, but it just took me back there because I didn't see the ambulance. I didn't see him get taken away. Truth be told, I didn't see him that night. They wouldn't let me see him. I didn't see him until he was dressed for his funeral. And that's a trigger for me. Because I literally, how do I know that's my son? I literally said goodbye to a black fabric bag with a gold zipper. I travel for work, and sometimes I will see someone with a garment bag. And I have to stop in my tracks because it reminds me of that night. I didn't get to touch my son's face. I didn't get to kiss him goodbye. I don't care what happened. It was my baby. But they wouldn't let me. All the stuff you see on TV, oh, we've got to identify the body. And no, it wasn't the case. And I still have difficulties with it. I don't know what protocol is. I don't know what they're supposed to do. He wasn't shot in the face or anything of that nature. So they claimed it was because of the investigation. And many people that I talk to say that that doesn't make sense. So I really don't know why. But I didn't get to say goodbye to my son for a few days. I didn't get to see him when I went to take his clothes to the funeral home. I got to see him once he was cleaned up and dressed and ready for his funeral. Yes, it was a couple days before, so that kind of allowed me to have my moment of shock before the day of his funeral. But still, it's crazy It's all crazy. It's crazy to think that my son's gone still now, 8 months later. There's still things that I want to just pick up the phone and call him. There's still things that trigger memories or how, oh my gosh, Miles would have had a field day with this. Or I forget that he's not here. Oh, I gotta call Miles in the morning. Then I realize I can't. Everyday life is just not the same. I recently had someone say to me, God wants the old Tanya back. And it was an older lady, so I was being respectful. But my thought was, no, you want the old Tanya back. You're trying to get the old Tanya back because God knows what I'm dealing with. And the old Tanya had 2 living, happy, breathing sons. This Tanya does not. It doesn't mean that I don't want to try to be the happiest me that I can be right now. But what people don't understand is, for me, honestly, I feel like moving forward or being happy, I honestly feel like that's disrespectful to my baby because he's not here. Not saying that's the case, but that's what makes it difficult for me to just be gung-ho back to as close to that person as possible, because to me that means I'm leaving my baby behind. And so many people, oh, that's not the case. You know he would want you to move forward. And I do. I know Miles, he would never want me to dwell on sadness. He would want me to move forward. He would want me to be happy. It's just hard. It's just hard. I have a support group for women, really for me, just to have other women around me who help support me. But of course, we're supporting each other. But I call it a mother's hurt because it came from a mother's hurt. Yes, it's a mother's heart, and yes, it's a mother's love and all of that. And there's so many groups and shows and things with that name. But this all came from a mother's hurt. Everything I do now, I feel like, has come out of a mother's hurt. Because I'm still hurting. I still sing at church. I sing at a couple churches. I still praise. I still thank God, but that does not mean that I'm not hurting. I can say it's easy to put on the facade, but it's actually not easy. It's something that I have to do because I don't want people, oh, you're okay, and oh, chin up, and trying to be encouraging and trying to think of something every week or every time they see me to try to cheer me up when I don't want that. Like, there's really not much that can cheer me up from the situation, from my grief. And the only way anybody will get the old Tanya back is if Tanya gets her son back. And we know that's not going to happen. That's it. That's all. And like I said, it was an older lady, and I get that she meant well and she was trying to get me to maybe be happier. I've been told I don't look like I used to, and, I don't joke as much as I used to. It's because I'm heartbroken. But I have to go through life. I have to. And another thing I noticed, people will say, take the time you need. You take as long as you want. You grieve and you deal with it for as long as you want, because nobody can tell you how to grieve or how long it should take to get over it. But then there's things like you have a job and there's expectations on your job. And not saying anything against companies or corporations, because unfortunately there is a bottom line that has to be met. So there's only so long that you're able to let your grief keep you from, I guess, performing at the capacity that you used to, because it gets to the point where, hey, we still have a bottom line to meet. We still have this to do. We still have that to do. Nothing against what you've been through, but we still have to get here. Jobs are only required to give you so much time for bereavement and for grief. So while it's nice to say take as much time as you want, it's really not the case. At least not while you're there. Now, once you leave, I guess you could just let that flutter of emotions go. But I'm realizing, even not just with, a job, just with things that you do in general, there's some things that you have to move forward with. I couldn't sit at home and cry all day and not take care of the bills. I can't decide I'm just going to sit here and sulk, and I'm not going to go to work, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to pay the bills. I'm just going to let everything pile up, because guess what? They'll start shutting things off. It's life. So some things force you to live again. Some things force you to pick yourself up and dust yourself off, even if it's for 8 hours. Look, while I'm at work, I'm going to have to be at this capacity because there's people who are depending on me. I'm not one of those people who say that job don't care about you, because I don't agree with that. At least where I work. I can't speak for where anyone else works. I know that at my job, they care about me and they care about my well-being and my mental health, but they also have to care about the things that we need to take care of to keep our job going. And the things that I do, some of those things, they keep other people afloat. It's a trickle effect. And you don't think about that when you're saying, oh, take the time that you need. Again, it sounds good. I keep telling my mom, my family, this is uncharted territory. We've never had to deal with something like this. But to think that we're going to be able to just be, oh, woe is me every day. First of all, that's not in my character. Do I miss my son? Every single day. That'll never change. Does my heart hurt the moment I open my eyes every day? It absolutely does. But I'm still in the land of the living, and there's still things that have to be done, no matter how I'm feeling. Now, do I have my days where I just can't do it? I absolutely do. And because the people that I work with care enough about me, they will tell me, if you need to take a day, if you need to take the time to deal with it, to regroup, to reset, you go ahead and do that. And we may need to do that. You may need to do that, whatever grief you're dealing with. We've talked about grief isn't just losing a loved one. That's probably the hardest form of grief. But I know someone who's grieving a relationship right now. It was an off and on relationship, but they were very close and they cared about each other. And to not have that, what's comfortable to them, what they've been used to over the years, they're now dealing with grief. And they have a hard time dealing with that grief. She thinks he's moved on, so she's wondering who he's moved on with and trying to figure out where he is. And that's not your concern anymore. He wants to know who she's talking to, and it's not your concern anymore. But it's hard to let it go. You're still grieving. I hate to see anyone in pain. I think emotional pain may be worse than physical. And it's probably because I'm going through such emotional pain right now. But if you can take even a few minutes to just pull yourself away from it, to think about something happy, to think about happier times, to think about the times when you were yourself, when you were whole. Every little step counts. You may find yourself doing it more and more. And just so you know, I'm talking to myself right now as well. Because I'm having a hard time. April 5th, the day that this video drops, is my birthday. And this is my first birthday without my son. My kids always make a big deal on my birthday. And I don't know how it's going to be when I wake up that morning. Because I didn't know how it was going to be when I woke up on his birthday. I never know. I don't know how it's going to be from one day to the next. But I'm going to try to be positive. I'm still here. I'm still trying to keep his legacy going. Mighty is with us. Mighty is within us all. Mighty is with me wherever I go. He is in the position, as you see my Mighty Mouse here, where he can hug his mama whenever he wants. Yeah, I got a few tattoos. Miles had very, very many. He had a whole sleeve on one arm. He loved tattoos. So it was only right that I had one in memory of him. You do what you have to do. Keep their legacy alive. Keep the memory alive. We can't bring them back. Lord knows if I could, my baby would be right here with me. I've had dreams where he's been there, and it's mixed emotions for me because, your dreams can be so real. And I've had him there and hugging me, and I can feel his presence. And then to wake up and realize he's not here. It's upsetting, to be honest. It's like, why? Why do I have to go through this? I know he's gone. Why go through this emotional roller coaster? But I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. Will I ever figure it all out? Nah, I doubt it. I can't, at least not at this point. I can't fathom the reason for my baby to be gone. And yes, I know they say the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, and he needed him more than we did, and that kind of stuff I think is just stuff that people say. And I apologize if you're uber Christian and that's what you believe. I'm entitled to my opinion. And this didn't start with my son dying. I've had other family members that have passed away, and the Lord needed her more than he. No, my aunt was sick with cancer and her body was deteriorating and she was ready to go. So, it sounds okay to say, the Lord, and I'm not saying the Lord didn't. I don't know what the Lord needs. I can't speak for him, and neither can you. So I'm just saying, Lord, forgive me if I'm wrong. But I think some things people just say as a buffer or as a cushion. I've never been one who liked fluff. I like to just get to the point. So all that extra, I get saying, I feel for you. I'm sorry you're going through this. I wish I could take the pain away, but nobody truly knows the reason that things happen. Because if you're Christian, it says in his word, Those that live will surely die. Unfortunately, we want to be in control of when that happens. Now, if I had known I only had 24 years with my son, I would have done things a whole lot differently. A whole lot differently. I would have loved him the same. I definitely would have loved him the same because I didn't fail as a mother. But if I'd known our time was so limited, maybe I wouldn't have taught him so much about not having a child at a young age and not being married and those things. He actually listened. He actually was waiting. But now I don't have, it would have been nice to have a grandchild, and he has a little living legacy. But that wasn't my decision to make. And I had to come to terms with that. Yes, there's a lot that he didn't get to experience. He didn't even get to turn 25. But that was not my decision to make. It's not our decision to make. So that whole stage of grief, the bargaining stage, the begging stage, even the anger stage, we don't have control over it. It's hard to accept. It's hard to even say, but we don't. And I have to tell myself that more and more, because I still say, God, please just turn the hands of time back. Please. I don't care about anything that has happened since that day. And I've noticed when you have a major devastation or a major event, positive or negative, that happens in your life, you begin to measure time based on that event. It's really crazy, but I've realized that I would say, oh yeah, that was a while ago. Miles was still here then. Why do we do that? Now that's a question. Why do we do that? Oh yeah, I remember that. That had to be a year ago. Miles only been gone 8 months. Is it because we're thinking about how much that loss has affected us? I don't have the answer to the question. I've just noticed that even members of my family, when they talk about things, yeah, no, that was back in July because it was just a couple weeks before the whole Miles situation. It's referred to in so many weird ways. Before Miles left us. Before Miles passed. Before that whole situation. Before, why is it that is now how we tell time? How we gauge how long ago something happened is since that devastating event. There's so many questions. And I don't think there's any one definitive answer to a lot of the questions that relate to grief. And maybe that's why there's those answers like God needed him more, because that's the answer that works for that person. So again, if that's the answer you give, nothing against you. I promise you. I'm not going to say to you that ain't true. But just think about it. Everybody may not feel that way. I hope y'all enjoyed talking with me today. I'm just wishy-washy all over the place. But guess what? It's my podcast and I can do that. Because in everything that I do, just like in everything that you do, I'm going to be true to myself. You be true to yourself. Be strong and be mighty. As always, if you would like to join us as a guest, I don't have to sit here by myself. We'll make a way for you to join. If you would like to be a part of one of the podcasts, please email us at wearemighty24@gmail.com. We are here every other Friday on all podcast platforms. We're happy to see you. We're happy to talk to you. Be mighty, and we'll see you soon.
They won't stop me now, they won't stop me now, they won't stop me, no. They won't stop me now, they won't stop me now, they won't stop me, no.